I think Allan Brooks was not afraid to, pardon the pun, but ruffle some feathers with his particular brand of naturalism. Allan Brooks was passionately committed to what he considered to be the best way to support nature and to preserve nature. And so I think that kind of adamant refusal to bend in his morals and his beliefs is inspiring.
Last time we explored Allan Brooks's artistry and learned about the man behind the brush. But today, we're peeling back another layer of his story. Thanks to the incredible collection over at the Vernon Museum and Archives, we're diving into his personal journals and photographs. Can't wait for this one. These incredible, intimate artifacts offer a glimpse into his life, his adventures, inspirations, and the meticulous observations that fueled his art. So let's head back into the museum and uncover these treasures.
So we're here in the archives. Is this where you spend most of your time?
Yes, this is where my team and I spend most of our time kind of poking through the materials.
I love that.
Yeah, there's three of us.
Every superhero needs a team. Okay, cool. So, Allan Brooks, we're going to get to see in the docuseries, you know, a lot of the things that he did when he was alive, like where he hiked and bird watching and learning how to paint. And before we do all that, I wanted to start here because this is where we get to see Allan Brooks himself. So it's not a bird, I'm seeing what he looked like. I'm seeing Allan Brooks's face. You have documentation of where he lived and more importantly, you have his own writing.
That's correct.
There's a journal here.
Yes.
I feel like I'm getting to meet, like, you know, like I'm not a Swiftie, but if Taylor Swift, oh my God, it's her journal. Like, you've got Allan Brooks's journal here.
Absolutely. That's how it feels when you work in an archives. I think I mean, Vernon isn't a particularly large city, but you almost get this feeling that you're dealing with the materials of a celebrity because you research them so much.
Yeah.
And Allan Brooks is definitely an example of a local celebrity for us, so.
And the cool part about a journal is you're getting to hear, like you're reading what he felt and thought that day.
Correct, yeah.
And in his own writing.
That's right.
Like, that's so cool. It's like having someone's autograph. Like,
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, when you first started here, when you first stumbled on that, how did you feel? Like, did you know a lot of Allan Brooks when you first started here?
I knew about Allan Brooks through the Allan Brooks Nature Center when I started at the Museum and Archives, but I was able to learn a lot more about who he was as an individual through the materials we have in the archives and through members of the organization who'd been here a lot longer and could kind of fill me in on the person behind the myth, if you will. But yeah, being able to go through the records just gives you a different insight into who he was.
Okay, so let's start off with what we have out here first. So these are pictures that obviously someone has taken of Mr. Brooks.
That's correct.
Let's start with the first one here nearest you. Looks like during World War I. He's in all his glory.
So this photo was taken in 1917 in World War I when Allan Brooks was serving overseas as a sniper. As we mentioned earlier, he returned home to the Okanagan Landing in 1919 with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. So we have a photograph of him in his uniform with all his insignia.
It's funny too when you look back, because I've seen some of this old clothing and it's that heavy wool.
It is.
Imagine when it was a warm day, you still had to wear all
That's
that.
just it. I mean, both World Wars, it was hard work. Even just carrying the equipment and wearing the uniform was hard work. Not to mention the sacrifice that was
Of course.
was made.
And then same when he was in his personal time as as an artist and walking around, hiking in, because back 100 years ago, you always wore your finest, like what we would wear on a Sunday.
Yes.
They wore every single day. And they didn't have hiking boots with treads. They had flat-soled leather shoes that he would have to hike to go birdwatch.
Well, we have a photo of the commonage, which is on display in the gallery there, but he is dressed in a suit and tie, and he's up there in the commonage.
The effort that it took just to, my gosh. Okay, what's next here?
This is a photo of Allan Brooks in 1930, so he was
A little later in life?
a little later in life. We have 2 copies of that. Which
Oh,
is
so
great.
can I have that one?
No.
You have doubles. It's like we're trading hockey cards.
Yeah, it feels like that for sure.
Wow.
So that would have been, of course, during his time in Vernon. Now we have this photo, which isn't an original. This is a photocopy, but we do have another version of it in our collection. This is Allan Brooks as a younger man, so circa 1925 is the date.
Do we know where?
Interestingly, this photograph, the date of it is actually debated. We have 1925 as the date that was given by the donor, but we have another copy of the photograph that says the date is closer to 1900. And I'm inclined to believe that date just because
Because of his age.
yeah, he looks younger than the 1917 photograph, not
Yes.
older. So I would say this is more likely 1900.
This was funny too. Like the young kids these days, they have that beard and mustache
Yeah,
now.
he was
It's
the
pretty
original
cool.
hipster.
He was the original hipster.
Yeah.
And then what is that photo there?
And this photo is of Allan Brooks's house on the in the Landing. So it was just it was a relatively small property, but again, very biodiverse in terms of songbirds. And there's actually an interesting story.
And he was right on the lake.
That's correct. Yes.
Wow.
So there's a painting in the gallery again that it shows his viewpoint from his property, and it shows the lake. But
So even on a cold day, he could have just stayed inside out through his window and painted. That's beautiful.
yeah, there's an interesting story that came from his son, Allan Brooks Jr., who was born in 1927. Allan Brooks was, already later in life at the time he had his son, but Allan Brooks Jr. Was quoted as saying this one time there was a fire at their Okanagan Landing house, and kind of captures Allan Brooks's senior's personality, that he when he heard that there was a fire, he finished a stiff drink and then got up to fight the fire. So that was his, his priorities were
His priorities.
straight, but yeah.
And we knew how quick timber goes up back then. By the way, I think you had told me that you have I don't know if it's a map or such, but it's a map of Vernon that's sectioned off, I think it was over 100 years ago, for insurance purposes. Depending on which quadrant of the city you lived in, that's how they knew what to charge because
That's
of
correct.
the material the house was made out of?
That's correct. So the map was used to determine insurance premiums based on whether it was wood or it was brick or it was, we didn't have a lot of stone buildings, but
Or hay, I'm just trying.
yeah, we didn't have any hay, I don't think. But yeah, these different materials, of course, some are more prone to fire than others.
And that's how they judged your insurance base.
That's right. Yeah. Unfortunately, our fire insurance maps don't cover the Landing. They were city center, and in Allan Brooks's time, what was considered city center was quite restricted by what we would think of today. But yeah, that kind of map would help show the different materials being used.
And
in
do you know what might be around there now? Like if someone was driving down Okanagan Landing, whereabouts were
I believe Allan Brooks's the property has been developed. There really wouldn't be any trace of the house having been there.
Yeah.
If you go down that way, it's quite well built up now. So it definitely a different landscape from what he would have experienced. And again, you can see that in his paintings. The 1930s, it was basically bare then.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be a different world for Allan Brooks nowadays.
Of course. But I'm just saying, is it closer to Kin Beach or is it further down?
Well,
Like
it's a bit of a
total
challenge.
paddle wheel park?
Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge for us to be able to determine the exact location. because of that domination of the city center rhetoric.
Yes.
So all our assessment records are just, again, for that city center. So they don't go out to the landing. So most of what we would know about the property would likely come from word of mouth.
Okay. So I need a real estate forensic scientist.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what else do we have here?
Well, here we have a scrapbook that was put together by Allan Brooks.
He was a scrapbooker?
Well, you know,
Just joking.
I don't know that he personally put
You
this
did
together.
this.
No.
Or someone else did.
Someone else likely did this.
Yes.
It contains more so prints of his artwork.
Yes.
It doesn't contain any originals, but a number.
I don't think it'd be in a scrapbook if it was original.
Likely not. And Allan Brooks's prints was another way in which he made, you know, a living, was making prints and having them published in magazines or sold to the public.
There's his autograph right there.
Yep, there's his autograph, and there's good number of them here. So this was from these ones are from the Hilroy series.
What was that?
The Hilroy was a school workbook.
Oh.
And some of his prints were used for the covers.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so those are examples. So they have Hilroy series there, which would be a lovely notebook for a school-age child.
Imagine still having that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so you know, he really went in for a variety of colors and obviously different animal subjects, but yeah, his paintings.
Well, these wild animals, I mean, there's no way he stood there with an easel and a canvas painting, but would it be by memory or again, taxidermy?
I probably for the bighorn sheep, he would have had access to taxidermied specimens. I don't know that he would have had access to a buffalo or a bison
But it would just be from
taxidermy.
memory what he would think.
I would think so for the bison because, of course, even by this time they were an endangered species and there was protection measures. So I suspect this one was from observation and memory.
That's beautiful though. I mean, look at the coloring.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Very majestic.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to his journal.
Yes, you
Let's
bet.
see what he wrote. Okay, so what do we have here right now?
Yeah, so we have some real treasures here right now.
Before we get to this, let's start with the letter.
So this is a copy of a letter from Allan Brooks, which was sent to his father, William Brooks. And this is dated June 17th, 1897. And
When his father went back.
yes, his father would have been back in Ontario at this point, and Allan Brooks was hanging around in BC. And it has a note here that it was written at Sumas, so that was when he was kind of poking around Sumas Lake, which we talked about earlier, is now a filled-in part of the Fraser Lowland. But it's a copy of a letter he sent to his father in which he describes some of his observations in BC and includes a drawing of a fish.
What's some of the takeaway here?
So he talks about collecting little rock rabbits or pikas for Dr. Miriam, who was again a leading naturalist of the time. He also captured some Wright's flycatchers, again, which he would have probably caught to taxidermize and be able to study them later on.
People don't understand the science, too, that everything he was doing.
Yeah, so there's a lot of science. In addition to an artist, he was definitely a scientist.
How's this for a fish?
Yeah.
I love that.
I wish I had him on a line. Yeah, and then he talks about the caterpillars, and I'm assuming he's talking about tent caterpillars, which are an invasive species here in BC, and he talks about the havoc there.
The bush around our cabin is as leafless as winter, and in most parts of the BC it's the same, and they are simply black on the trunks. Limbs are making the trees look like cork bark elms.
He said spraying has saved most of the orchards in immediate vicinity, but at Chilliwack the devastation has been like a fire. So yeah, the inklings of Allan Brooks's concerns around invasive and predatory species coming in already.
Yeah. And speaking of predators, I mean, going back to him being an excellent marksman sniper, there were so many on his property, and other people were asking him to come and die.
sure.
I love, that's one of my favorite stories. Is no wonder he became a sniper in the army.
Oh,
Because every time
absolutely.
there was a predator on someone's land,
Yeah.
well, they wouldn't call him, but I mean,
yeah.
they get their kid to run over to his property and
Absolutely.
call him over or something.
Yeah, he took his role as a protector of nature very seriously.
Yes.
So that's a great
is
piece to have
perfect.
in our collection. We don't have a lot of direct writings from Allan Brooks, so being able to hear, his voice as told in his letter
I love that.
is wonderful.
And then speaking of his voice, what do we have here?
So this is, as we mentioned earlier, probably one of the greatest treasures, I would say, in our archival collection here. This is Allan Brooks's field guide, which was purchased by the organization from the granddaughter of Sidney Williams, and Sidney Williams was one of Allan Brooks's very close friends. So this was created by Allan Brooks starting in 1888, and he used it to record his observations about bird species in his travels. I think he was working on it until about 1900. So it's species from all around Canada and even into the United States.
Look at the penmanship.
Yes. So in contrast to the letter, which is a typed transcript,
Yes.
we get to see his actual writing in the journal, as well as his
little drawing,
little drawings.
So instead of falcon, he put falco.
Yeah.
Is that a type of bird that I'm unaware of, or was this a quicker way of saying
I
falcon
think
back
maybe
then?
it was shorthand. Yeah, I'm not too sure. Unless it could also be the Latin name.
But I love that you've got the information, but you always need to
That's right.
have a photo to.
But yeah, it's
Wow.
just remarkable the amount of detail he put into, just a journal. And yeah.
This looks like someone actually added this like a sticker on top of it afterward. Like that's how brilliant the colors still are.
Absolutely,
Like how is
yeah.
this like clean still after so many years?
Well, part of it is that this journal was later restored. Not the contents, but the cover.
Okay.
The leather cover was restored and rebound to keep it safe. And another
It just pops his drawings just pop out of the book.
another advantage that has managed to keep this document so pristine over so many years is that materials are stored in archival grade containers, whether that's envelopes or boxes, that helps to preserve them for longer periods of time and hopefully indefinitely.
And the same here in the archives. I mean, the temperature that's in here, the lighting that's in here, everything. You have to think of everything.
Yes, the lighting has to be a certain,
Wattage?
I think it's lumens.
Yes, lumens, yes.
Yeah, certain lumens to keep the materials safe, and also it has to be temperature and humidity controlled. So we have a temperature of ideally around 18 to 20 in here, and then our humidity is set between 40 and 50.
It's almost like taking care of fine wine.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
What is your favorite part about the book here? Is there anything here that popped out to you, whether it was one of his, something that he had stated or a drawing or anything that you loved?
Well, I love the drawings. Of course, they're all beautiful. There's some that are particularly stunning, I think. I do quite like this photo of the bluebird. I like that he has made observations of how the bird looks. So it says,
Did you notice there's a male and the female sign?
yep, so he's identified the differences between the male and the female. He's also put the length, which he would have been able to record from specimens.
Yes.
And then I also enjoy that he puts the rarity of the birds. So, next to the bluebird, he has very rare. Or does that say not rare?
Not, it looks like not.
It says, well, okay, this one.
Very.
This is a very rare Townsend solitaire, and then he has some more common species as well. So, despite rarity, he treats them all with the same kind of reverence.
How do you see Brooks's work inspiring new generations of artists, naturalists, and conservationists?
Well, I think Allan Brooks was not afraid to, pardon the pun, but ruffle some feathers with his particular brand of naturalism. So his interventionist policies or thoughts did cause some concern among other naturalists who were a bit more of that hands-off. They had a bit more of that hands-off approach. But Allan Brooks was passionately committed to what he considered to be the best way to support nature. and to preserve nature. And so I think that kind of adamant refusal to bend in his morals and his beliefs is inspiring to folks like myself, but also naturalists. And of course, how we approach naturalism is different nowadays, but I still think it requires that level of determination and passion to, you know, see nature thrive and flourish.
If you could meet Allan Brooks, if you can go back in time, is there something you'd like to discuss or a question you'd like to ask him?
Well, I would be very curious just to hear, you know, some of his stories from his adventures, not only in BC and in Canada, but he traveled all around the world. He traveled even after he'd had a child and had a wife. He took the whole family with him, and they did a world tour. So I would just like to hear, you know, his perspectives, maybe even what was his favorite observation that he made, what species was his personal favorite that he saw in all these travels. So I think that would be really interesting to ask him.
He was definitely passionate.
Very passionate.
Very driven.
Yes.
Well, thank you for allowing us here and showing us a lot of items that maybe most people don't get a chance to see.
Yes, it's been my pleasure.
And this is a good way to kick off our docuseries. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Reading Allan Brooks's journal and seeing his photographs brought a story to life in a way that was truly unforgettable. Through his notes and images, we see not just an artist, but a man deeply connected to the world around him. But next time, we'll actually walk in his footsteps, quite literally. We're heading out to the field with local bird watchers to experience nature the way that Allan did. And until then, my friends, keep exploring, and I'll see you soon.